aging is
Well,
huge
good
problem.
afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being on time and joining us here at the Beta Zone. I'd like to start off this session perhaps with a thought. You know, we've been talking about aging for years as a crisis, a challenge. But I'd like to put this to you. If living longer has actually been one of humanity's greatest achievements, why is it that our economy still seems so unprepared for it? So perhaps the question isn't so much whether or not longevity is an asset, but why are we failing to capitalize on its value? To introduce myself, my name is Olivia Siong. I'm an editor and correspondent with CNA. I'm very happy to be here and to be joined by a very esteemed panel next to me. I'd like to just introduce them. Mr. Kevin Strain, who is President and CEO of Sun Life Financial. We also have Mr. Chavalit Frederick Tsao, Chairman of TPC Group. Liu Qian, Founder and CEO of Wusawa Advisory, and she's the former Managing Director of the Economist Group here in China. And right at the end, last but not least, David Jacob, CEO of Marsh Asia. Thank you so much for joining us. Could we give them a round of applause, please? So we'll begin this discussion with a short round of questions between me and the panelists. Following that, we'll have time for questions from the floor. So I do encourage you to start thinking of those burning questions you have to ask our panelists. And I'd also like to highlight that the World Economic Forum, together with Marsh, has also just released a new report titled The Longevity Dividend, the Business Case for Linking Health and Wealth. And you can find that online as well. Many of the themes that we'll be discussing today are, framed around very interesting findings in that report. And if you're taking photos and posting about this session, please do use the hashtag AMNC26 as well. So let's jump right into it. David knows I like to do this. We were on a panel about aging as well last year. But we'd like to start with a quick fire round. So just one thought, one sentence, no elaboration. All of you engage with communities, governments, business leaders. What is one misconception about aging? Kevin.
I think that, one sentence. that's hard, actually.
Elaboration.
No elaboration. It's, a misconception is that it's a straight line process, and it's not a straight line process. And it's different for everybody.
Okay. Fred.
Oh, well, aging is a natural process, but don't let fear of death when you get closer get the better of you.
Okay. Qian.
On top of my mind, when we think about aging, is typically women that support the men. So it's the wives, the daughters-in-law that support the old men, and we need to change that.
Mm-hmm. David.
You can be optimal at any age.
Okay. I have many questions following that round, but I'd like to start with Kevin.
Yeah.
You mentioned it's not a straight line. And I know you've spoken before about how we cannot think of our lifespan as separated between work, health, finances. And so when Sun Life talks about ensuring a long time of financial security for its people, why does that model break down? The separation breakdown, why doesn't it work when it comes to, now we all live longer?
Yeah, I think that if you think about, so as a company, we've been around 160 years, and our purpose is to help clients achieve lifetime financial security and lead healthier lives. Our purpose of lifetime financial security has been with us most of that 160 years, and we identified a long time ago that was a combination of life insurance for protection reasons, health insurance for protection reasons, and wealth management for wealth creation, and that you needed long-term thinking, long-term plans that saw across each of those categories. In the last 10 years, we saw an opportunity to add to that this concept of living healthier lives, because work is healthy, work is how you accumulate your wealth, it is healthy for you, but we also found that we knew a lot about people through our benefits that we could help them lead healthier lives and live healthier lives, so we added that. But even more recently, we've been thinking about this concept of achieving, Because in fact, now you don't really achieve lifetime financial security. When your retirement was lasting 10 years, you may achieve it. You'd work 40 years, you'd have a retirement that lasted 10 or 15 years. People could handle the math of what that looked like. Now you might work 40 years and your savings have to last 40 years or potentially in the future even longer. And so we're shifting our thinking from achieving lifetime financial security to building it. So you're thinking about that being both your accumulation phase, but also your deaccumulation phase. And how do you think about your assets, your wealth, your health in retirement differently and being part of an interactive solution? But one of the things that slows people down is you have to think about this. This is not, we're used to 1-year plans, 5-year strategies. This is 80 years of thinking through what does your plan look like to both accumulate wealth, protect it, and deaccumulate wealth, and what does your plan look like to live healthier through those combinations. And you're seeing that because people are living longer and living healthier, they're also enjoying their retirement differently, which is part of what I was saying with the straight line, right? In your early years of retirement, you want to use more of your wealth that you've created, but you don't want to use so much that you don't have enough to save for the future, right? And I think that people struggle to understand long-term thinking. And that's where advice comes in, and I know we have some advisors that are here too. Like, that's where that advice of talking to people about what does it look like, how do the combination of these go together, what's your retirement going to look and feel like? And we're trying to do more. We had a session we did with our senior leaders at MIT, and MIT has a longevity lab, and trying to learn more about what your life looks like in retirement today so that we could best suit financial plans to that.
David, I'd like to bring you in here. So Kevin was talking about how maybe institutions today are not exactly geared up for a longer lifespan. I'd like to push the argument a little bit further. When it comes to retirement, there's this statistic. The number of people aged over 65 worldwide is expected to increase by more than 50% by 2040. So does retirement still make sense if people are living longer, to 90, to 100, beyond? I know you have some views about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to understand that, you know, we are sitting on a huge economic opportunity with aging. And you think about the number of people that, I would say, the untapped productivity of people who leave the organization too early in their careers. You know, whether that's, you know, they're being sort of forced out because of certain, you know, sort of age-related rules, and what that means in terms of this whole concept that lifespan is outgrowing health span. And that puts enormous burden on both private and public spending when it comes down to healthcare. So I think, you know, it's not just companies that have a duty, but it's also the governments in really thinking about, first and foremost, how do we prolong more productivity for the older workforce? Are there opportunities for 55-year-old plus to 70 to continue extending their work span in a company? And then ultimately, if they're healthier, if they're more productive, if they have more purpose, then ultimately there's less burden on the society going forward. So it's not, like you said, it's not as straightforward, but we are staring at, you know, like you said, quite a huge statistic in terms of number of people that will be retiring soon.
I'd just like to quickly follow up on that, though. You talk about encouraging workers to work for longer periods of time and having purpose, but another question is whether or not people want to do that.
Okay. Yeah.
And if you're dealing with societies that have a young population that has unemployment issues, that would be a challenge, wouldn't it?
Yeah, you're right. So there has to be a balance. You know, certain you know, geographies or certain demographics will have different opportunities, but it's going to be a balance. But I do feel that, you know, that there's a tremendous, you know, they talk about this sort of silver economy, right? $7 trillion of opportunity. How do we capture that effectively going forward? And I do feel, you know, I'm 58, right? I want to continue working longer. But I want to make sure that I'm healthy, right? Because if you're healthy, you're more productive at work. If you're more productive at work, the wealthier you get. The wealthier you get, the more you can spend on health. So those whole dynamics need to continue to work together.
So it's a changing mindset as well.
Behavior. But again, behavior is hard. If you think about, many corporations that have put together wellness programs for their employees, the take-up rates are still very low. So how do we get behavior change for a lot of employees to embrace the fact that they need to be healthy now to be able to be productive going forward?
Tian, I'd like to bring you in there because we've been talking about the costs, perhaps, of aging. A lot of discussion when it comes to aging is about healthcare cost, healthcare burden. But you also have a perspective on that. And before we get to that, you are an economist. You focus a lot on geopolitics and trade, but you also do a lot of research on gender economics. And there was this finding in the report that really struck me, in which it said that a single year of caregiving combined with the gender pay gap can reduce a woman's retirement savings by almost 25%. And that is a staggering figure to me as a woman myself. So what's your research telling you about perhaps what businesses or governments or industry leaders, what are they missing here?
Yeah, so usually when we think about aging, we think about old people, but I want to talk about this from a sort of a sustainability perspective, which is about the young and the babies. So instead of talking about the aging per se, I want to come in from an angle of fertility issues that we have around the world, the decreasing level of fertility throughout the world. And there are a few, because ultimately, the young support the old, and the babies and the young become the future old. So for one is that we're seeing this dropping fertility rates, especially in the past several years, COVID-related, for instance, people substitute that, dating, having babies, marriages through alcohol, through computer games. They're not going out to the pubs, depression rates, et cetera, et cetera. So that's part of it. But Harvard professor Claudia Golding actually looked at this. She looked at the study. So she was comparing U.S. in the past a couple of hundred years, and she also looked at more than 20 countries in OECD countries, basically. And she finds that while the global trend of fertility has been growing down, there have been two different kind of groups of countries that really stand out. The one that experienced the more pronounced fertility drops are the countries that tend to have, on one hand, a very rapid economic growth and a rising women empowerment and autonomy, but on the other hand, has a very traditional value to it. So countries such as Italy, Spain, Japan, South Korea, while the countries were growing extremely fast, the traditional family value kicks in where the women are the ones that are taking care of the babies and does the majority part of the housework. So when she was comparing all these countries, she started to realize that conflict between the female sort of autonomy versus the traditional family value. So basically, at countries where you would see the men share much less of housework compared to women are the countries that experience much faster drop of fertility rates. So this is telling us for us to have a more sustainable fertility and aging population, men need to step in and do more housework. So that's a very important conclusion that we're seeing. Well, studies from the last 200 years and 20 plus countries around the world. So I find that absolutely fascinating. So that's one. And then on top of the willingness to have babies, there's also the problem of infertility. We usually think about, why are people no longer wanting to date and marry and have babies? But the truth is, when we actually look around the couples who want to have babies, 1/6 of them are not able to have babies. And this is because of all kinds of sort of biological, environmental problems. And it's very important to know, because traditionally we kind of feel like, if a woman is unable to get pregnant, she needs to go exercise. She needs to reduce the amount of cigarettes or alcohol, et cetera. But science tells us that's not the case. Men account for at least 50% of the problems. And one of the most fascinating studies related to this is a group of professors led by Levin. They look at sperm counts throughout the world in the last 45 years. And they realize that the total sperm count in the last 40 years reduced by more than 60% throughout the world, developed countries, emerging markets. And this is caused by a combination of health, lifestyle, pollution, what we eat, certain plastics that we use, all of that. So what this is telling us is that in order to increase the fertility, hence the future opportunities of aging, is also equally important to care about men's health and to care about their sperm qualities. I'll stop it there for now.
Food for thought. But before we go into a question for Fred, I'd like to get David and Kevin's perspective on this gender gap that we are talking about, a long-term one, including starting from even before people start getting old in that sense. Is that gap starting to be reflected in businesses or clients or plans and advice that you're giving?
I think that what you see is it's somewhat different by country too. If I talked about Canada, we've known for many years in the families that we serve, the women make more of the financial decisions than the men, and our best advisors often are the ones who know how to tap into that and how to speak to that and how to understand that family dynamic. And again, I think that if you're thinking about lifetime financial security and healthier lives, it takes a plan that you stick to over time. And I'm not sure if it matters whether it's a man or a woman. It's really about figuring out the plan for the family that they can work at. Nobody achieves lifetime financial security in 1 year. There's nobody who buys life insurance, health insurance, retirement product, education savings product all in 1 year. It never happens because nobody makes enough money to do that, right? So it's really about finding how do you talk to the family, how do you talk to them about what the costs are going to look like, and what the program is to do this, because it's not an easy program. You have to say, there's something I want to do this year that I'm not going to be able to do because I'm saving towards these things. And I think that conversation and teaching people how to have that conversation, and often women do think about this differently than men, and so we try to train our advisors and our distribution partners how to approach those conversations with the families, and in a way that is empowering to the families as they're making those decisions.
David, you want to chime in here quickly?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, it's true, like the burden of caregiving, almost falls squarely on the women. And, in order for companies to be entirely successful, we need to make sure that, our women are well protected in terms of if they have to leave the organization to be able to, provide caregiving to, the elderly or to their parents. We have to ensure that their position in the firm is secure, to be able to come back and not miss a beat. And I think this is where governments need to help as well in terms of pension, right? People who leave companies for 5 years, they lose out on that. So there has to be these sort of care credits based on the recent longevity report that you can actually tap into.
It's a new idea.
Protect you, right?
Yeah.
Because, just to add on that, because as a trained economist, GDP only counts for the economic activities that are transactional with money, basically. And so if I care for the old, for my husband, or for the kids, they're not being paid for that, then they're not part of the official economy. So by actually giving proper and adequate amount of credits to women who does all this care work, then the whole world economy can grow significantly.
Fred, I'd like to bring you into the conversation here because a lot of the talk is about how we can make people productive, how do we show that they are contributing to the economy. If you were to advise a government or a business, given your expertise, however, is there a different measure that we should be looking at beyond an economic measure like GDP, if we want to measure how well we are addressing longevity?
I think that measurement about well-being, happiness can only answer by individuals because it's inside us, it's not outside us. We have a system based on medical care. And of course, government medical systems cannot hold. Insurance medical system keep going up, will soon cannot hold by individual. We have to understand healthcare is very cheap. But healthcare can only achieve through education, the shift of mindsets, like gender issue, faith issue, race issue, age issues. This can only be done through a change of mindset, how we relate, and through education. Of course, education has formal, has family, has business, social media. So we have to think about a way of intervening in changing our mindset. If you have health care, first you have to start with self-care. That means the work has to be done by yourself. And the cost is very low. If you're healthy, you have no medical bills. That's, of course, the right way for government to go. But, you know, government don't understand much about health, and the health ministry, like the education ministry, is the most difficult ministry to change their mind, and most difficult ministry to change. Everywhere around the world, including in China, they work very hard to change. Healthcare ministry, Western medicine. They cannot get out of the medical care mindset. And in China, pushing Chinese medicine, a big problem because the whole administration is Western trained with a medical care mindset, right? Education was an industrial education. Parents, teacher, and also the education minister. Chinese use so many ways, so many rules, shut down everything. But it cannot still succeed because until the mindset is changed in parents, students, and education ministry, status quo. Consciousness is the foundation of shifting. If we're not even conscious, we will not want to change. We're conscious, we want to change. You are conscious how to change, you change. So education on offering in collaboration is to change the reality and shift that consciousness. No other way. We need to change from a medical care mindset to a health care, self-care, self-love mindset. And where everybody is responsible for the individual health. And of course, we cannot have individual health because we live a life of a whole universe system, both visible or invisible. Or say, what's invisible? You think your body decides or it's your mind? What's happening in your mind works the body. The body is only a vehicle for your mind. So the universe works like that. That's a whole life system. So Chinese got it. They said, we're going to be oneness with the cosmos in the way we live. And then we have wealth, healthiness, and including caring for Earth as well.
I think
because we live in it.
That brings us to a great point that sums it up for us, that there's this mindset shift that needs to happen, and we're talking about different aspects, gender, business, financial security, but we don't want to just talk about the issues that we are facing now. I'd like to also move to talk about what are some of the solutions or opportunities that come with longevity. Qian, I'd like to bring in China as an example, like Fred mentioned. You know, if China has one of the fastest aging populations of the world, and its population age 65 and above is expected to grow by almost 70% by 2040. So many people see, as we've been talking about, that demographics are a challenge. But when it comes to China's case, is it a challenge or is it an opportunity for it to be a laboratory, perhaps, for longevity?
So there's certainly opportunity. For instance, we talk about women or men. When we look at this, in China itself, the estimate is that the silver economy is about 10% of the GDP, so that's quite significant. And when we have, for instance, until last year, the official retirement age for men is 60, and for women is 50 or 55. So the gap between the official retirement age to the final days are so long that this will just increase more opportunities for savings, pensions, expenditures, services, communities, and all of that. So that's the plus side. But I'm also very worried about the significant drop, this cliff that we're looking at, the fertility drops in China, right? So let me come back to that, and you talk about solutions. When we look at the world, there is no magical solution to all of a sudden flip over and to increase the fertility drops, but there are ways that we can slow it down. At the moment, the mainstream policy in China is to give more subsidies. So to encourage the couples and give them more money, because that would kind of lessen the burdens. But we look into this and we argue that is not really the right policy direction for this. A few years ago, some famous male economists did a study on the fertility cost in China. And they find that if you were to raise a kid in China from age 0 to 18 years old, then on average, that costs $68,000 to raise a kid. That is very high. That ratio is several times higher compared to France, Germany, US when it comes to the cost versus GDP per head. So in China, it's actually very expensive to raise a kid. So then the government started to be, okay, we're going to give more subsidies to cover for the milk powders, the education fees, the housings, etc. But I work with Professor Zhao Yaohui and Zhang Xiaobo on this, and we find that there is actually another very important cost. So in some of the leading countries, there's this concept called motherhood penalty. So it's not direct cost that I'm paying for the baby. I'm not taking it out of my pocket, but it's the opportunity cost if I, the woman, the mother, stayed in Korea. On average, globally, every child is equal to about 20 to 30% of a woman's lifetime income. So we borrow that and do the calculation for China, and we realize that that number is $78,000, which means just the one cost of motherhood penalty is much higher than all the milk powders, the educations, all the housing, fertilities, and all of that combined, which means if there were only one kind of policy, then the solution should be emphasizing on how to help women to lessen the burden for the healthcare. And let me take back what I say to help women, because it's not the women's responsibility, it's the household and it's the entire society's responsibility to take care of the kids. So my solution on that would be, in a way, rather than say, let's empower the women this way and say, remind the women to behave more responsibly as mothers or wives, the solution would be to encourage the dads to be picking up more housework and to glorify the dads, and that you're the super husband and you're the super dad when you do more work. I think that is the solution. Not I think. Economic research has found out that the best solution to change the dropping fertility rate is for the fathers to pick up more housework.
Yep. We see you have supporters here, Qian. Yes. So Kevin, no pressure. Next question's to you. I mean, how are you viewing China's changing demographics, particularly from the financial planning services point of view?
Let me take a step back. Oftentimes, and Sun Life's a truly global company. We're in 28 countries around the world, and I've been to China probably 4 times, 5 times in the last 12 months. When I meet other executives, there's a dialogue in the U.S. that people like to talk about, that China's declining population is going to spell economic disaster for China. And I've been turning this around on them to say, in an AI world where things are going to become more efficient, isn't this an advantage, not a disadvantage? Because while we're trying to search for jobs for the people that have been losing their jobs, the AI is replacing that sort of trend there. So I actually think that there's a lot of talk, especially in the West, about China's economy and population, and I think it's misplaced in the current world where AI is changing that calculation. And you're seeing that calculation change all over the place. People are just one factor now, a very important factor, the most important factor, but technology is changing the number of people being the only factor. And I think that that's something that's quite new to all of us, right? And I know that we're starting to think about that. I have Laura, our head of IT, in the front row here. And, we're thinking about when we have programmers, do we have 1,000 programmers, or do we have 1,000 programmers that are powered by 1,000 agents, and we actually have 2,000 programmers? So I think that the AI, the technology change that's happening, is going to be a major factor. It's also a major factor when you think about healthier lives. I'm on the board of a hospital in Canada, the second largest hospital board. We are seeing unbelievable treatments that never existed before. We've broken the brain-blood barrier, which is, in essence, you can now treat blood clots in your brain using ultrasound. And you don't have to do surgeries, you don't have to do those types of things. There is so much that's changing from the technology that's allowing people to live longer that is super important as well. So I think if you think about China, I'd go back and say there's 1.4 billion people that live here. There's amazing technologists, amazing universities and education in Tsao. You are just seeing incredible things, and I think the world needs the best way to take advantage of these is to have the innovation happening everywhere and sharing the innovation and learning from it, and that is going to add to people's length of their life. But then you come back to, we all want to have money, and we want to have a nice retirement. So thinking about that and the longevity of that over the long term is actually something that's fundamental to our purpose. But we need to understand what's happening to the economy, what's happening with the digital transformation, with AI, and how that's impacting things like health.
So technology certainly has given us many opportunities that maybe we don't even know the full extent of just yet. But here's another provocative finding from the report. In fact, when many conversations we've been having are indeed about AI, and clearly it's going to help with longevity, but the WEF report finds that the longevity opportunity has, quote, nothing to do with artificial intelligence, and everything to do with how we organize health, work, and care. And in fact, it finds that low-tech, low-cost measures could unlock $6 trillion in healthcare savings by 2040. And that comes from simple things, the report finds, like exercise, having hearing aids, or preventing falls.
Yeah, there's all of the basics, fundamentals are really important, but don't underestimate the impact of AI to analyze what's happening and then adding to that. So.
Yeah. David, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that technology can, play a significant part, of course, in the aging sort of discussion. I will say, though, that it is not the end all, right? I think we have to obviously use AI to complement the human capability components that are going to be so important. And, there's also much more meaningful things such as, fertility discussions. You think about immigration policies. You're thinking about curtailing early retirement, fiscal reform, what we do in the caregiver society. All of these protocols, processes are going to be so important to overlay.
Let me give you a really personal example. My dad's 85 now. When he was 80 years old, he'd smoked his whole life, 60 years, 3 packs a day, got lung cancer. Treated with chemotherapy, radiation, surgery. They did the surgery, the lump was so big they had to take his left lung out. They did the surgery through his back using technology that is new today, that didn't exist 20 years ago. He was walking within 24 hours, and he's perfectly healthy today. That is where technology is fundamentally changing how we're going to live older in life, because as you live longer, unfortunately, I hate to say this as an insurance person, we're all going to have a critical illness. These things come, these is what happens to the body. Preparing for it and knowing that you were going to live far longer. If my dad had that surgery 20 years ago, he wouldn't be living 5-6 years later perfectly healthy. They would have cut him open in the front, taken the lung out, it would have been very complex. The technology is fundamentally changing how we survive illnesses. And understanding that and preparing for that is super important.
Yeah, so it's a dual, sounds like a dual.
It's a dual thing.
Opportunity, more opportunities makes it better for everyone. Just don't neglect also the simple stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're going to get to our question and answers very, very soon. I see a hand here already. But Fred, I'd like to get your take because we were speaking yesterday and you mentioned that well-being isn't necessarily, like we shouldn't think of it necessarily as separate from economics, right? That was your main point as well. So if you could make one decision or one policy move that could be different to truly make that happen, make that a reality, what would you say that could be?
UN policy or Singapore policy or China policy, it's not possible to answer without context. I can share something about economics. You're an economist, I'm a working economist. We create economy and we have to understand economy to run business and drive economy using business. So, way we look at it, marketing, when there's a desire that you can satisfy, that's economy. Economic activity is nothing but activity to meet a desire. Now, we have all kinds of desire. So we must understand humanity, understand the complexity of integrating desire. Now you have better broader. It's like well-being is a very integrated, and it's the same desire for all humanity, no matter colors. That's why it's the biggest trend and the biggest opportunity. And aging is part of it, right? Aging is good, especially in the AI era. Let's cover the AI and then about all the other tech.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's think about what AI brings us. First of all, AI brings us freedom and equality. Because when AI come, they do production. If you have talent, you can create, you can be feeding a baby, you can be retired, you may be in the toilet. You can still work because it's not locational specific. And the agents will do your work. And by the way, China is going to make it so available that old people will have old robots. They take care of them. And women will have family robot to do the cleaning. So let's not worry about that because I think it's going to come within the next 10 years. And then more important, when we go in the state of AI comes, we are free. This is some of the freedom. But we have to really heal ourselves. Everybody feels stress? That's a death sentence. Family stress? People stress? Environment stress? The whole world, the whole life system is stressed. We need to really now dealing about wellness. Because if the system that we're in is stress, we cannot run away from stress, pollution, blah, blah, blah. So we need to work together to create this reality. That is the biggest humanity mental shift. To create what United Nations advocate, the well-being and happiness economy. To really develop what is GNH-driven, not GDP. Because GDP, that's AI robots' job. Our job is to be free.
And GNH referring to Gross National Happiness Index.
Go to Bhutan.
Yep, that's right.
No, that's just the initiative, but they don't do so well.
On that note, we'd like to take a few questions. We're running a bit short of time. We'll take maybe 3 questions at a time. Maybe here first, and then we'll go to the lady in the back, and one from this side. And hopefully, if we can keep our answers brief, we can take another round of questions.
Yeah, my name is Michael Nuren. I represent Ukraine, agriculture sector, but I want to share my experience regarding the issues about women and fertility. Very, very briefly, I used to be the governor of Kyiv region. It's the capital region, one of the biggest in the country. And when I came to the power and we were sitting down, deciding, looking at the statistics, I found that the rate of fertility in my region is very low comparing to other regions. And I was asking why. What was the answer? Because it was one of the most prominent regions. The salaries are higher, but the quality of life also is higher, and the cost of life is higher. And then we understood one bottleneck and one the reason I think that is not giving the push for fertility to go up, and this is access to the kindergartens. for small babies to bring a woman back to work and to their careers. Because, you know, school education is obligatory. So in 6 or 7 years, children go to school. But before that, this is a critical time to bring them there and to bring women back and to be socialized. Why it was critical for my region? Because we underinvested for that. There were no public enough kindergartens, very expensive private. So women didn't go to get a birth to a baby because they understood that they will be stuck, sorry for this word, for 5-6 years at home and not making career, and this is the cost for that, because the family can survive in our country in that time only when both of parents are working. So maybe, childcare. So one question to you, whether you think this is one of the critical points to bring a woman back to career, and to engage her again back to economy. One thing, and the question to all of you, what do you think about the retirement time? So whether it will be increased in next 15-20 years, and to what level? Because our country did this 5 years ago. We increased 62 and 60 now, and I think it's not the maximum level. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take the next question. We'd like to give as many people the chance to ask questions, so if you could keep it brief. Thank you so much.
So thank you so much, Jessica Phim from Cognizant. You spoke about the untapped potential of keeping people in the workforce for longer. What about those receiving care in retirement villages or home care? When AI gives us answers for everything, what's the value of a lifetime of lived experience, and how do we use technology to capture and retain wisdom for future generations?
Thank you. We'll take one more question.
I'm co-founder of Giro, a pharmaceutical company. We use physics to model biology, rejuvenated mice, having deals with Roche and Pfizer. The question is, we switched to aging once we learned about strange animal, naked mole rat. Our humans' probability of dying double every 8 years, and for them it's flat, it's not increasing. They don't lose anything. They don't go frail, they don't lose reproduction functions, cognitive, nothing, and live 10 times longer. It happened back in time, a few decades ago. After that, Google made a special company, California Life Company, headed by current chairman of Apple, Arthur Levinson, who previously sold Genentech to Roche for $50 billion. They bought thousands of these animals, published 2 papers in 2018 and 2024, actually saying that aging maybe is not the law of nature. After that, some bats, some lobsters, some sharks, some whales, some turtles saw. It looks like aging is not the law of nature. And from another side, we see these terrible talks about silver tsunami, that aging will ruin economy, blah, blah, blah. But we don't see huge international programs explicitly telling that aging is a problem. We should try to make the therapy against aging. What's happening here?
Thank you. Thank you for your question.
Can I answer the retirement one really quickly?
Yep.
I don't think it's up to us to pick what age people retire at. I think it's up to them, and it's also a little bit up to their health. And it's up to us as an insurance company to try to tell them if their financial plan allows for them to do it. I have a friend who just retired at 55. I'm not to tell him whether he should have waited to 60 or 65, but we help him to know, will his money last? And that's the important role that we can play, not to dictate when people are going to retire. Because some people want to work till they're 80, and some people want to work till they're 50. But the question is, will they have a plan that supports that? Oh, yeah, sorry, but back to other countries. Every country has a different pension system. You have to link your plan to the system of that country, 100%.
David, I'd like to get your thoughts on untapped potential of mature workers.
Yeah, I mean, I was talking to my colleague the other day, and there's a whole ecosystem that I think can be built for people that have to retire, or of course policies will have them retire. And it could be almost this sort of gig environment for people who have retired, but still able to provide value in different forms of work. And so if companies make that available, in terms of a sort of a platform that people can tap into, then people can be working all throughout and feeling the purpose, right? I think that's what happens when people slow down. You don't have a purpose. Yeah. You're not engaged anymore in the environment. That's where mental decline, Alzheimer's, dementia, et cetera. So I think keeping people much more engaged in their twilight in terms of being able to work is going to be crucial.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Qian and Fred, could we get your thoughts on the childcare issue, whether that is a bottleneck you see or maybe opportunity? And Fred, if you could then weigh in also on the silver tsunami, whether you see anything that can be done more on a more global level. Maybe start with Qian.
Yeah, so on kindergarten, absolutely. So there are several policies that we see throughout the world, whether it's kindergartens or from the government or from like grandparents, et cetera. They do play a role. But more importantly, another very effective one is paternal leave. So fathers take parental leave, so it's not just mothers. So for instance, take Scandinavian countries like Sweden. If I remember my numbers correctly, then Sweden has about every child, the parents have about 18 months of parental leave, and within that 18 months, at least 3 months, it has to be the fathers, and they're non-transferable. And what this means is that when the parents have babies, both the father and the mothers will have disruptions for their career, even if marginally still the majority of them are taken by women, but the employers still have to find substitutes for the fathers as well. So that would be more marginal. So these are some of the policies that we see throughout the world that works. Thank you.
Fred, what?
Oh yeah, I see.
With the silver tsunami.
Well, first of all, it's not a tsunami. I'm 70 years old, probably older than any of the panelists here. I think it's great. I think when you reach an age when you start thinking about death, for example, you have to start answering the existential question about life. Who am I? Why am I here? What am I here to do? Where am I going? That's death. This question everybody asks. Very few continue to find an answer for themselves. It's a good time to start thinking about it. And then work on your mind. Work on yourself. Cultivate yourself. Reset your mind to live healthily, to express love all the time, and be purposeful and truly enjoy life with your AI companion that does all your work. Okay? That's my advice.
Unfortunately, we've run out of time, but I do want to give all of us one thing we can take away from this session. So I'm going to put you on the spot again. Previously, it was one sentence, now just one word. Help me fill in the blank here. A society has successfully turned aging into an asset when blank. And if you can give us one thing that maybe doesn't exist yet today. Oh. Let's start with David.
Right, can you say that again, Olivia?
Help me complete this sentence.
Yeah.
A society has successfully turned aging into an asset when blank.
When? I think in the next 5 years, and ultimately it will really depend on. I look at the companies being.
Is that one word?
Oh, sorry.
One word.
Okay, one sentence more.
One sentence.
Okay. But quick one. No elaboration again, but we can carry that on.
Companies need to take control of the health agenda in their organizations.
Okay, Qian.
Women work more, so they make more and spend more, and men take care of their health to produce better sperms and do more and better housework.
Fred.
When we discovered that we are love itself.
Kevin,
I want to
take us home.
I want to end on that one. I'm going to say, you know, when we start to think long term.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I think to round out the discussion, it's very clear the opportunity from longevity is there, and it's our job to seize it. Yes. Thank you so much, everyone, for today.